In this video, we're going to talk about the business-to-business buying process, so let's jump into it. How are regular folks like you and I that aren't blessed with massive marketing budgets supposed to compete in spaces that take a ton of money, a ton of time, and a ton of resources, all while trying to stay sane? That's the question, and on this podcast, we're here to help you find answers. Welcome to the Marketing Stuff Podcast. All right, so this is the 7th video of our Marketing Basics, Marketing Fundamentals course. If you've missed any of the videos, jump back, check out the playlist, which I'll put somewhere around here so that you can get access to the full playlist. We're building a multi-part Principles of Marketing course that's free to you on YouTube. Okay, let's talk about Section 7. Here are our 5 learning outcomes. We're going to talk about the ways that B2B businesses segment their markets, list out the steps in the B2B buying process, identify the roles within the buying center, describe the different types of organizational culture, and then detail the different buying situations. Now, before I talk about any of these, what you will notice is that if you look at Section 6 and Section 7, there's going to be some overlap between the two. And I'll talk about that later on. So let's jump into learning objective 1, talk about the ways B2B business segments their markets. So there's essentially 4 types of B2B markets. You can be a manufacturer or service provider. This is where you're going to take the raw materials, raw tools, raw resources in order to produce goods or services. Typically, we would say someone is a manufacturer or service provider if they're taking the tools and resources and then producing something unique, right? And by unique, I mean that the output is different than the input. And the reason why I'm trying to make this distinction is that if for some reason you take someone else's tools, resources, services, and then essentially relabel them and then sell them in their same form, then you're not technically a service provider. What you are is a reseller or a distributor or a wholesaler, or, we might even call you a white labeler.
What do I call you?
Any of those things, they're all resellers. And those are intermediaries of pre-existing products or services, right? And you're taking those in and you're not changing them significantly. We might even say affiliate marketers. Those are resellers, okay? And then you have institutions. So this includes hospitals, schools, religious organizations. Oftentimes they will contribute resources. They'll contribute research in order to further a field. And then you have governments, some of the largest buyers of goods and services, and oftentimes will defy standard economic trends because they will buy stuff regardless of the conditions of the market, right? Okay, so let's talk about the steps in the B2B buying process. So you have need recognition, product specification, RFP process, proposal analysis, order specification, and then vendor performance assessment. Okay, so step 1, the needs recognition, exactly the same as it is in the B2C that we talked about in chapter 1. Where we start seeing some varying of the process, or I would even say more detail of the process, is when we start getting into step 2 of product specification. So after the business has finished the need recognition process, they'll list out all the potential specifications they need and create a list of what they want to see from their potential vendor or supplier. Then the RFP process is a formal process where the business will request the details about the vendor's capability and then what they have as far as an offer that they can provide to solve the problem that was recognized in step 1, okay? Step 4 is the proposal analysis. So the buyer reviews all the RFPs based on the requirements. And then step 5, we have the order specification. So this is when we're going to go out and we're actually going to go out and place the order. And then in step 6, we have our vendor performance assessment. Now, here's where I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial to some people. There is little difference between the B2B buying process, step 1 through 6, versus the B2B, B2C process, steps 1 through 5. The difference is the level of formality. Much of what we do in business to business, we do the same thing in B2C. The only difference, as far as our consumer is concerned, or the buying process is concerned, the only difference is the scale or the stake of the decisions. If you've watched any other videos, you've heard me say this before. Most of the time, people, what we're most afraid of is making a mistake. This process is designed to minimize mistakes and, some may not agree with this, distribute blame. Distribute blame. It is very hard to blame me as the purchaser for a bad purchase if we've gone through, rounds of vetting out a business, rounds of vetting out a service provider. You're much less likely to make a mistake if there is a process that says this is how we go about picking these people, right? There's less control on your end, so again, less blame, but also it removes some of the emotional attachment behind some of the buying, right? That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I said it removes some, it mitigates some. Okay, now this is where I would say that the buying process gets from B2B to B2C gets a little more complex. And it has to do with these buying centers. So this is a group of people that are typically responsible for the buying decision in a large organization. So you have your initiator, the person that kicks off the buying decision, the influencer, a person in the group who has influence over members of the buying center, right? Decider, the person who will ultimately make the decision if you're going to buy what you're going to buy. The buyer, the one who will handle the paperwork and send off the payment. The user, the one that's actually going to use the product, and then the gatekeeper, the one that controls information or access to decisions or to decision makers and influencers. Here's why I say it gets a little more complex. All of these roles exist in a B2C context. The difference is, in many cases, in a B2C context, these are one or two people that play these roles. Whereas in a B2B context, one or more people can be involved with each one of the roles. So you can have two influencers, you can have two deciders, you can have two or more users, you can have multiple gatekeepers, right? So the complexity of the B2B process isn't the actual steps. It's the level or it's the amount of people in the buying center. Hey, Maurice here, different Maurice than from the show that you're watching right now. If you want access to all the resources that I'm talking about and you don't want to have to write them down, in the notes below, you'll find a link. If you register there, I have included all the resources that I talk about inside of this free database. It's yours. So get back to the show. I hope you enjoy. And I'll go so far as to say two pieces with this. The reason why we have this large, complex system between a more formalized buying process and more buying centers here or more people in the buying center, it doesn't have to do with the fact that B2B is so different. It has to do with the level of the scale of the mistake is so large. As you start to make more personal choices, that the scale increases, we oftentimes go to find more people to include in the buying process in order to mitigate the likelihood that we will make a mistake. Just think about it for a second. If you're buying a pack of gum, you are all 6 of these. If you are buying a $30,000 car, you probably are going to want to talk to somebody before you buy that car. If you are married and your family needs a car, then multiple roles are being occupied by multiple people, okay? If you're about to drop $500,000 into a business, then you may even have, as an individual, multiple of these roles filled. You may have an assistant that works with you. You may not be the end user of the business, right? You might be purchasing the business with the intent of having somebody else run it. Your influencer could be your mentor. You are the decider. You might be the buyer, but maybe you didn't initiate it. Maybe a friend of yours actually initiated it by bringing it to you. We don't know, right? So just understand that. Think of these as roles, not as people, okay? So number 4, describe the different types of organizational culture. Again, we go through these in real life. So we have democratic, autocratic, consultative, and then consensus. In an autocratic buying environment, the buying center is like one person. They make all the decisions alone. Again, roles, not people. They're just going to bang it out, okay? Democratic buying center, they're going to spend time to get people's opinions, majority rules. Consultative buying center, it's kind of a hybrid between autocratic and democratic. There's one person that actually makes the decision, but they're going to solicit the input of others. And then consensus buying center is where all members of the team has to reach a collective agreement. Something interesting here is that I think the level of where we see these play out will have more to do with the size and scope of the business. If you are a new business, most of the time you're going to be autocratic. It's just you and that bad boy. If it is a big business, Fortune 100, you may be democratic at the board level, but on the individual, like management level, day-to-day choices that need to be made about the department, you may be autocratic or consultative, right? If you're the owner of a company and you're 50-50, then it's consensus, right? You both have to agree to some degree. So depending on the size, scope, scale, will change the type of buying center or the organizational environment that we experience. Okay. All right. Detail the different buying situations. You have a new buy, modified rebuy, or straight rebuy. We can think about these as new buy is like, I don't have any experience with it. Modified rebuy is that I'm going to buy the same thing, but I want a slight change. And then your straight rebuy is like, I'm going to buy the exact same thing. I don't need anything new. Okay. So the really interesting part about these is like the more change or the more newness we enter into the scenario, the more time and complexity we introduce into the decision. New buy takes the longest amount of time, is the most complex. It's because there's a lot of opportunity for failure. Modified rebuy. Let's say I have a heating and cooling company. I purchase the same type of van every 2 years and I add one to my fleet. When it comes time to buy, I may realize that we're going to purchase the same brand, same line, but maybe I want to get some modifications to it. Maybe I'm going to have them install some like a toolkit in the back. That's a modified rebuy. I'm buying the same thing. I know it's going to work because it's always worked. The only adjustment here is like, how much do I want to spend on getting the toolkit installed in the back? A straight rebuy, same scenario, buying the van. I always get a toolkit installed, and I just want them to do the exact same thing, but the most updated model to the vehicle, right? These are what we talk about when we say in the buying situations. When we remove newness, the faster that decision will come, and oftentimes it will be done with the same vendor, unless that vendor has done something or my needs have changed, and then it may shift to a modified rebuy, or we may consider it a new buy. So that's chapter 7, super simple. Again, the business-to-business process is very similar to the B2C process, so this chapter is really short. If you have any questions or you like access to this document, please feel free to drop your questions in the comments. And if you want this document, go over to mauriceadavis.com/thevault. Outside of that, stay out here winning, y'all.